If it's nerdy, we're into it.
Gaming, movies, television, wrestling, comics, whatever. We are Kyle Eckert and Chris Heck, two lifelong friends with a passion for the world of geekery.
And this is the GeeK KetchUp Podcast.
Welcome to our Season 2 premiere, the 17th chapter in the GeeK KetchUp saga. I'm Kyle Eckert.
I'm Chris Heck.
And today we're going to be taking a deep dive into our summer of gaming and beyond. Chris and I took a short break, so we'll catch you up on what we've been playing, reading, watching, all of the above. But before we do, we'd like to take a moment and say thank you for listening. If you'd like to help us spread the word about our show, please share us with your friends. Catch us on Twitter and Instagram at GeeK KetchUp Pod, on Facebook and YouTube, GeeK KetchUp Podcast, and of course our website, GeeKKetchUpPodcast.com. We appreciate the love. So 2020 has been a weird year all around, but it's especially taken a toll on the summer months, a time when you expect to be barbecuing a little bit, maybe spending some time outside. But with everything that's been going on, we found ourselves inside more than usual. Not that we're complaining, because it leaves us a little more time to indulge our hobbies.
Yeah, it was definitely a weird start to the year for us because of obviously everything going on with the pandemic. And then for us, we've been kind of in the thick of things with getting GeeK KetchUp going and growing. And so our plan after, a busy initial 6 months of the year was to take a break in July. But ultimately, I think I'd call it more of a half break.
Yeah, a half break. We stepped away for a little bit.
Yeah, we weren't actively recording new episodes, but we did put a lot of time into GeeK KetchUp to enhance things like our intro that you may have just heard, how we handle some of our social media. We also started the process of getting some swag made, so keep an eye out in the coming weeks for info on how to get things like maybe GeeK KetchUp shirts and pins and stickers. So even though we would stepped away from creating new episodes, we were doing a ton during our break for GeeK KetchUp, and so super excited about all of that. For me personally, though, I did spend the first half of July taking care of Link, our 100-pound boxer mix, while he was wearing the cone of shame.
Yeah, the cone of shame. Poor guy.
He had a little surgery on his paw, had some stitches, and so he had 2 weeks of the cone, and he did great. And he has fully recovered. He wasn't too much trouble. That took some effort and time really, because you got to keep him away from digging at it and scratching at it and ripping those stitches out. I think everybody's probably had an animal that's had to wear the cone,
Yeah. Glad to hear that he's recovered well and doing good. He looks so upset in the picture that you had posted with the cone on. He just looks so mad. And he is, historically, Link is just a very happy-go-lucky dog.
Oh, yeah.
So to see him upset.
He was pissed. That was 30 minutes after we put the cone on him, and he was just kind of walking around all depressed and unhappy. But normally, yeah, he is super happy-go-lucky. He figured out, though, I'll say this, he figured out over time that he could attack you with the cone. So if you were standing there, since it gave him kind of horns in a way, this extra room.
Yeah.
He'd just come up to you and ram you in the ass with it and, be like, I want you to do something. Feed me, and it's like, God, what was that?
Yeah. How did Zelda react to it?
I think Zelda was just like, what the hell is wrong with you, bro?
Yeah. So Chris's other dog, Zelda.
Yeah, my other dog, Zelda. She's had to wear the cone before, too, so she knows what it's like.
Yeah, she knows the pain and suffering.
Uh-huh. It changes things. It kind of calms him down a little bit, for that time period. But as soon as he was out of it, he was out running around and doesn't seem to have any issues with his paw, so we're happy all in all.
There you go. Back to chasing squirrels and rabbits and birds.
Yeah. What about you, man?
So July has been a little crazy. Obviously, continuing on with all the GeeK KetchUp stuff and trying to get that new intro made. We've got a lot of videos and YouTube content coming your way as well, but we've also been in the process of trying to buy a new house.
Oh.
Or just, I shouldn't say a new house, buy a house. That's a whole thing to do when you're not in the middle of a pandemic.
Yep.
So doing it in the middle of a pandemic has been pretty crazy.
It's completely stress-free.
Oh, yeah. No biggie. Yeah, completely stress-free. It's been fine. I'm not grinding my teeth at night or anything, But no, we've been looking at trying to buy a new house. And so obviously that's going to mean moving here in the next couple months. So getting all of that figured out and situated. Work has been a little crazy. So not something I've talked about too much here on the show, but I do work in educational tech, and that has been a little stressful as a lot of, public schools and things like that around the country are moving to an all virtual environment.
Right.
So as somebody that works in educational tech and then the behind the scenes type things, it's been a pretty crazy July getting ready for a fall semester that will be all online, and something that, at least in my area, we've never quite approached.
Yeah. I mean, everybody's trying to take routes that they've never driven before, especially in education. And every school system's approaching it differently. We've talked a lot about it, but it's kind of wild just to see all the different options that are going on and the scramble to get this going. I work from home 100% of my time, so it's a little bit different because for me, it's like, this is just everyday life.
Yeah.
But for industries like yours, it's a total, 180 from what you're used to.
Oh yeah, and it's been a crazy transition from, I think we started the work from home process in March, and it took a couple weeks to settle in and get used to that, and now there's a whole new thing where we're going to be doing completely synchronous learning, with Zooms and Google Meets and live chats with students and stuff, and making sure that everything is prepared and good to go. And on my side of things, it's teaching teachers how to use tools to enhance their online environment. So
very important work these days.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I've never felt more important at work than I have the past couple months.
Well, I can relate to some of the job stuff because I recently started a new job as what they call a Scrum Master at my work. So a lot of my time every day through July was just doing tons of training, and we'll just call my employer Wayne Enterprises. We do work in technology and get a lot. So there's a whole bunch going on, lots of change. So, once again, it was nice to have the little bit of a break from some of what we were doing with GeeK KetchUp, but, life doesn't stop. 2020 is definitely changing things for everybody. So we had a whole lot going on with work. I know for me, I kind of leaned back on not just some of the games that we're going to talk about later as a way to kind of relax, but I really was still putting as much effort as I could into finding as much time as possible to relax from playing my guitars.
Oh, yeah, nice.
Over the last couple of years, it's really become a stress reliever for me as I've gotten a little bit more capable. And so now it's almost like I look forward to that hour a day that I just sit down and jam some Metallica or whatever, Godsmack, hard rock, things like, it's just like, yeah, get the aggression out, get a little creative. So that's been my big thing, still try to just keep that one constant on a mostly daily basis, right? But what about you? Have you found any cool ways to kind of dial back that stress from buying a house and changing how education works in this country?
Right. Yeah, single-handedly changing it, sure. No, doing a lot of sinking back into my hobbies and finding a lot of things that I've always enjoyed and just reviewing them. And so for me, it's been a lot of catching up on shows on Netflix and just kind of taking a moment to decompress. Been doing a lot of comics reading, honestly, because that's something, working from home, video games, Netflix, all the above, that's screen time.
Yep.
So while you use the guitar, I find myself moving into comics more, just to go to that paper environment where there's no screen, there's no lights. It's just a nice way to relax. So I've really indulged myself in my back catalog of comics that I've needed to read. I posted about it a couple weeks ago when we were on vacation. I was doing a lot of comics reading, and I did some Batman the Black Mirror, read that. I caught up on East of West, and another big one that I've been reading is Red Hood Outlaw.
Awesome.
All those comics. And then lastly, I shouldn't say as well, is New Avengers. The old Bendis run on New Avengers is something that took me years to complete. I have it in trade form. I don't have it in single issues, but I've been casually picking up a trade probably since I started collecting comics about 10 years ago. And so I finally collected the entire run and was able to read the final trade, and that was pretty cool. It is the Siege tie-in trade.
Okay.
For anyone that's wondering. And it was nice. It was cool, and it was interesting to finally read that and have some closure on that story.
Yeah.
Which felt like it was a little bit of closure on a part of my life. Like I finally collected all 13 or 14 different trade paperbacks and, reading them one at a time over the course of 10 years.
Right.
So to finally read that last one, it was like a weird moment where it's a final trade and the final issue does have this like overall closing feel to it. And so when I read it, it gave me that sense of completion.
That's awesome.
And it was pretty cool. It was nice to just to do that, read some comics, watch some shows, all that, just to take a break from craziness that's going on.
Yeah, for sure. It's super important. I mean, I know probably everybody's figuring it out, but I know I have personally had to lean back on some of those activities as much as possible just to keep sane
Yeah.
through all of this. Because there's just so much going on. There's still so much confusion and unknowns out there as far as what things look like moving forward. And it's also felt kind of weird, right? Just to be a little honest here, it's felt a little weird to also have a lot going on in 2020. And, and I know that that's not the situation for everybody, but for us, 2020 has been this weird negative, but it's also been a whole lot of positives.
Yeah.
And that balancing act is strange mentally, it's strange physically. We're living different, working different, everything's turned upside down, and you've got to find ways to keep yourself grounded, right? So hopefully everybody out there has been able to do what they love and find time to relieve stress and, during all of this the way they enjoy. But we thought we would just share some of the stuff that was really helping us out through all of this. And, you talked about Netflix and catching up on shows. I know we're going to talk a whole lot about games here a little bit later in this chapter, but one thing that just recently came out that had us excited is the Umbrella Academy Season 2 on Netflix.
Oh, yeah.
I think you finished it. You want to talk a little bit about what your thoughts were and if it lived up to the success of Season 1?
Yeah, absolutely. I finished it that first weekend it came out.
Crushed it.
As soon as it dropped on Friday, I started watching it, and then I finished it up on Sunday afternoon, and it's easy enough. It's 10 episodes. This season felt a little shorter, and I didn't actually compare numbers to pick up on it if it's true or not, but it seemed like all of the episodes were in the 40 to 52 minute range.
Yeah.
Which makes it so consumable. It's really strange how different a 45-minute show feels compared to a 60-minute show.
It is true.
As far as like when you go to approach it, I know that everybody talks about that. It's nobody blinks when they watch 3 episodes of The Office in a row to fill 60 minutes. But if you go to watch an episode of The Wire and it's 60 minutes, you're like, ugh, I don't know if I can do it.
Yeah.
So that's been something I thought was great about Umbrella Academy, that it was fun and fast-paced, and it really just kept you moving, and one episode right after the other, like, gave you the hook and wanted you just go ahead and, yes, I'm still watching and keep playing it. So I thought overall, it was a fantastic season. There are a few knocks here and there I had on it. Obviously, time travel presents some issues, and I think overall plot points, there are some issues there, but at the end of the day, it was fun, and I enjoyed it, and I will definitely be rewatching it. Where are you at in that season? I know you haven't finished, but we're at roughly what episode?
Yeah, we're through episode 9, so we've just got the finale left. I just didn't have enough time to get it fit in before, we were recording this chapter, but I couldn't agree with you more. I think that, about 90% of it has been solid. It's a ton of fun. Really, what I'm attracted to the most with the Umbrella Academy is just the characters themselves, the actual, I'll call them kids, but, they're adults now, but the 8 that make up the Umbrella Academy, all being so different, and the actors do well portraying those differences between them all, but then they've got this real kind of human connection between them, even if they don't know it, right? So it's really created since even through season 1, and I think even more in season 2, a lot of really good kind of human moments and character growth moments for all of these folks, because they're all, if we think back to season 1, they're all very much individuals at this time, kind of separated, not hanging out, not going to family barbecues, and then as the 2 seasons have gone on, we've seen that really change and evolve to them being more of this family that they're supposed to be. But all in all, I think that it's been good. I love time travel storylines, since you brought it up, especially when they're done well. And I think for the most part, it's done well. There's, without spoiling too much since it just came out, they do jump to a number of different parts of the timeline. And a lot of times that can be hard to follow. But sitting there and watching it with my wife, I don't think we really had too much trouble with it. It seems like the way they presented it and cover things and then kind of use the different points in history.
Yeah, and they do a good job of referencing when the 7 brothers and sisters show up in the 1960s, because that's kind of like the big hook at the beginning, is that obviously they all go back in time to the 60s, and then, not really any spoilers, they all get brought back into time at a different point in the 60s. They all get dropped in the same place in Dallas in the same alleyway, but they show up either a year, 3 years, 3 months apart from each other.
Yep.
And I think, and when I remember in that first episode they did that, I'm like, okay, I need to remember who showed up first in what year and blah, blah, blah. But they did a good job of reminding you that, okay, so Klaus has been here for 3 years.
Yeah.
Luther's only been here for 1 year. Vanya's been here for a month. Like that sort of thing.
Yeah, there was lots of little tidbits here and there to just kind of keep it all straight for you, which I really appreciated, because I don't necessarily think they would have had to have gone that far, but they just put it together well.
Yeah, and it was well done that it's not being obvious and laying it all out on the plate for you.
Yeah.
Because there's certain shows that just give you everything. They spoon feed you the whole show. and I know that, like, the shows that you and I watch, that's not something I gravitate for. I like shows that make me think, make me remember.
Yep.
Every time I watch it, on every rewatch, I pick up something new. I like shows like that.
Yeah.
And so I think they found a nice balance of not giving you everything, but also giving you enough nuggets that it wasn't confusing for, maybe the average person that this is their first time even watching Umbrella Academy.
Yeah.
Or maybe they skip season 1.
I really think that there's very few weaknesses with this show. I mean, the writing, the special effects, the action, the performances, as I mentioned, they're all pretty top notch. I mean, it's not the greatest show that's ever been made, but I think that it's better than a lot of others. And there's not really anything that you can, or I should say this, there's not really anything that I like glaringly see as like, ooh, that missed the mark, or they went low budget over here. You know what I mean? Everything is given 100%.
Right.
I think my only real knock, though, it's kind of a 50-50. Like, I like that season 2 picks up pretty much exactly where season 1 ends.
Right.
And kind of continues it. But my one knock, I feel, over this season so far, and I haven't watched the end, but it is kind of the same plot as season 1.
Yep. That is my number one issue with this season as well.
Oh, okay. That's funny. We did not talk about this beforehand.
Yeah, it's funny because that has been my big thing the whole time. And I got in a discussion with another one of our buddies, and I was like, it's not exactly the same plot, but more or less it's the same plot with almost identical individual moments.
Yeah.
That we saw in season 1. Like, I'm thinking of Luther. Kind of, this is a semi-spoiler, I guess, but if you saw season 1, Luther had that one episode where he got really high and he went to the rave.
Yeah.
We kind of had a repetition of that this season. There was another 15-minute moment where he kind of got high and on a tank of nitrous.
Yeah.
Those moments. So, yeah, I'm sorry, I feel like I cut you off there, but
no,
that is 100% my feelings that I love season 1. And so, in turn, I liked the story that season 1 told me. So if you're going to tell me the same story again, I'm probably still going to like it.
Right.
But I would like to see some growth as the season 3 comes around.
Exactly. And sometimes shows do this, and sometimes it makes sense. And so I think all in all, it makes sense for them to have gone this route here. And I'm hopeful that we'll see in the finale that it'll kind of wrap up this part of the storyline so it can move forward into season 3 and beyond. The biggest saving grace to it, even though there are some of those major similarities, was that they do kind of take everything a layer or two deeper.
Mm-hmm.
They're building on everything they gave us in the first one, so all of the Umbrella Academy characters obviously get deeper and grow, and we see more of them, which is always fantastic. But then we also get to see some other characters that we didn't see in season 1,
right?
Or maybe some other characters that we didn't see as much of in season 1. So I'll kind of leave it at that so we don't ruin it for anybody who hasn't watched it all yet. But they did bring plenty of substance to add to a similar plot, which has kept me sucked in because I just keep wanting to know more and more about these characters. I love Klaus. Klaus and Five are by far my favorite. I think Allison is also kind of intriguing at times, but I was going to ask you who your favorite members of the Umbrella Academy are.
I feel like we do this all too often where we have the exact same answers. I turn and I look at my wall of pops next to me, and the 3 Umbrella Academy pops that I have are Five, Klaus, and Ben.
Oh, and Ben.
Ben is probably my favorite of them all. I think the dynamic that he's dead and Klaus has resurrected him.
Yeah.
And, only Klaus can really see Ben. It is cool. But I'll say the season 2, I've enjoyed Allison's subplot.
Yep.
Where she's gotten married I like the introduction of Rey, and they're in the 60s, and they're, having the full racial justice storyline that they've gone on to and tied it in with Kennedy.
Right.
In the 60s, I've really enjoyed Allison's subplot this season more than I think I enjoyed her subplot with her daughter in the first season. But across the board, the subplots I've really enjoyed. I like Luther's subplot where he gets mixed in with the mafia a little bit.
Yep.
All of those have really done well. So that's kind of made up for the overall plot, the overall story arc being very similar to season 1.
That is a good point. They did a good job kind of giving everybody very kind of unique places when they are getting into the season. Thinking back on it now that you mention it, I really found all of them very interesting. Like there wasn't really any moments where they were showing us one or the other, and I was like, who cares about this one? Get back to what's happening with Allison, or get back to what's happening with Luther. It's like as they're all coming through, it keeps you engaged and kind of on the edge of your seat just to go, okay, like what has he been doing, or what is going to happen next? And so all in all, it's a show that kind of came out of nowhere for me. I wasn't familiar with the Umbrella Academy before season 1 came out,
right?
Because it is a little bit more of a obscure comic, or I don't want to say B-list, but it's not as popular as a mainstream comic.
Published by Dark Horse,
right?
So like not one of the big two,
right? But they have knocked it out of the park, and I'm a huge fan now moving forward,
Oh yeah, absolutely. I'm same boat. I wasn't too familiar with the Umbrella Academy when season 1 came out, but I am fascinated with movie and television retellings of books. And I know a lot of people are like, oh, you got to stay true to the books. But I'm always fascinated by slight changes that people make. And as a huge Harry Potter fan, it's actually one of the reasons I like the movies and the books. Like it's kind of two different tellings of the same story.
Right.
Not exact. Obviously, it's the same, like Harry, whatever. I'm not going to get into a Harry Potter discussion, but I like to see subtle changes that you make here and there. And I think Umbrella Academy, from having gone back and really read up on the graphic novel and kind of everything that happened there, I like the changes that they've made for the show.
That's great.
And really kind of diversifying the cast a little bit. They did that. I think that's awesome. They changed Luther up a little bit, changed everybody up a hair, some powers slightly different, and I think all of it has benefited into a really terrific show that is bringing us into a new age of superheroes, where it's not about the powers, it's about the people.
Right. Well, and I think too about shows like The Boys that is getting popularity. We've seen so many superhero stories from the mainstream, and they are great with Marvel and DC and everything like that that's going on. As much content is out there for superheroes, it's kind of weird to say this, but I think that there's actually a lot more room for lesser characters and lesser known titles to get into the game and get onto the scene, because everybody is just so into superheroes,
Yeah.
Seeing them in different fashions than what we're used to, like here, or like The Boys, where they're all kind of like anti-heroes and stuff like that, I think is super interesting, simply because it's time for that evolution to happen and for us to see, like, not every superhero needs to be a Captain America Boy Scout.
Oh yeah. Well, and they can all have personal problems. It's one of the things that everyone has loved about Marvel characters for so long in the comics, that it's usually more about them and their day-to-day lives and what they go through and the internal struggle than it is the superpower, than it is the heat vision, the ice breath, the flying, and the saving the girl.
That's true.
And so it's nice to see that genre really coming into itself and providing options. I think we saw the start with Logan and Deadpool, where we're kind of, it's a superhero movie, but it's got its own twist, and now we're really starting to see like character dives in The Watchmen, Umbrella Academy, The Boys, all good examples of it's not about the powers, it's about the people.
Yep, I totally agree. I am here for it. Well, Kyle and I may not have taken quite the break we were originally expecting in July, but it was still a great month that gave us lots of opportunities to focus on ourselves and our families. So now, before we dive into the games that we've been playing lately, let's take a few moments to focus on you, the GeeK KetchUP community.
A few weeks back, we polled the GeeK KetchUP community with the following scenario. You're down to your last quarter in the arcade with Street Fighter, Double Dragon, and Rampage in front of you. Which do you play? We had an astounding 112 votes and 199 total comments back to us. 25% were all about the destruction, choosing Rampage, with George the Gorilla as the top monster. 33% preferred the double mint brawling action of Double Dragon. And lastly, 42% were ready to Hadouken their way to victory in Street Fighter. And to no surprise, there was an overwhelming amount of Ryu mains out there. We loved hearing from everyone and look forward to your responses in future posts.
It was really awesome to hear from so many in the community as you all told us about which games you would choose. Rampage, Street Fighter, and Double Dragon are all super fun games, and I think if I had to choose one, I'd put my money on kicking ass with Billy and Jimmy Lee in Double Dragon. What about you, Kyle?
Same. I love couch co-op action. I know Rampage also offers that, but there's something about that punch hip toss.
Well, and I was thinking, if I got one quarter, which of these games could I drag that quarter out the longest? Like, which could I go the furthest in on one credit?
Yeah.
And I think that would be Double Dragon for me.
See, I actually think mine would be Rampage, but I still prefer to play Double Dragon.
Awesome. Well, since unfortunately neither of us have personal arcades yet with all of these great cabinets, we spent some time with a few other fantastic games from the modern era, and we want to share some thoughts about what's impressed and or disappointed us about them. So first up is a game that came out just a few months back on June 19th and was absolutely one of the most anticipated games of not only this year, but of the entire PS4 generation. Of course, we're talking about Naughty Dog's The Last of Us 2 here, and consider this your spoiler warning as we will be talking about some of the events from the story. So Kyle, we waited a long time for this game, and while I'm still wrapping it up, you powered through it pretty quickly. So let's start with you and your thoughts. Did it live up to the hype for you?
I will say I'm a huge original Last of Us fan, the 2013 first game. It is in my top 3 games of all time. So there was a lot of hype to live up to, but at the same time, I felt that game perfectly existed and didn't need a sequel.
Sure.
A sequel was gravy. I already got everything I wanted. So anything else is just extra. That being said, yeah, it absolutely lived up to the hype. There was no way it wasn't for me because it was just extra content.
Sure.
That's not to say I was totally pleased with every single part of the game.
Okay.
But in the end, I did thoroughly enjoy my experience.
Yeah, as I mentioned, I haven't beaten it yet. I'm about 65 to 75% complete. It did get away from me just with everything that was going on in July. And then some of these other games, actually, that we'll talk about it a little bit later, that kind of stole some of my gaming time out of nowhere from Last of Us. But I do have to agree. I think everything I've played so far definitely falls into the category of living up to the hype.
Yeah.
It is a great, fluid progression of what they started in the first one. There's a natural increase in what you can do. The worlds, look even more detailed, and the graphics are even better. From moment one, you can kind of tell that you're in for a good ride once you start down the path.
Oh, yeah, and I wholeheartedly agree there. I mean, they bumped up the mechanics, finally gave Ellie a knife that doesn't break. That's really nice. Everyone's been trained a little more, so you're a little more fluid in your execution of your moves.
Yep.
The mechanics are the same as before. And so if you felt that the first game was a little clunky at times, it's going to be a little clunky again. They haven't totally revamped that, but the little changes they made, and like I said, giving you a knife that doesn't break, the different crafting materials you have, all of that's been doubled down on, and they did a great job. But you mentioned it, the environment and the graphics of it all, and that's where I think this game truly shines, because every year that passes in the game, we get farther into this post-apocalyptic world.
Yep.
And the trees grow over and the plantation life grows over a little more, and one of the coolest parts of the entire game is Seattle.
Yeah.
And seeing what an overgrown post-apocalyptic Seattle really looks like, it was gorgeous.
Yeah, and they did it from two sides. Like, you have the forest coming in from the inland and taking over the city, streets and buildings with trees and brush and all of that. But I also thought it was cool because eventually you make your way over to the water side of Seattle and seeing how, I don't know if it's necessarily just like the oceans have risen, but more like the connection of the rivers and like the erosion of land.
Yeah.
You can tell that the shoreline has started to move up closer to the city as well. So you kind of get these environmental changes on both sides. You'd mentioned just before we get too far away from it, but the mechanics, I definitely agree with you that maybe one of my knocks on it would be that the movement and looting mechanics like still feel a little clunky. Sometimes I notice like Ellie has these weird high elbows, so when you're like moving around, she just kind of looks a little goofy with her arms, you know?
Yeah.
Where I think that they actually improved was the combat mechanics. And I wanted to see what your thoughts were here because I remember the very first time I played Last of Us 1, like there was a lot of talk about how frustrating the combat was between being third person and very clunky, you know, a lot of weapon sway and things like that. There was a lot of situations where you're fighting clickers, you're fighting humans, whatever it may be, and you just die because you can't hit something or you get caught on a wall, you know, whatever it may be. Some of that clunkiness would come through and you would pay for it. I don't know if I felt like that has happened in Last of Us 2. Like I felt many a times where I'm like, man, like I'm getting through some of these fights a lot easier, you know, not having as much issue with wasting ammo from just missing shots like I did a lot in the first one. So I just wanted to see what your thoughts were there before we get too far away from what you mentioned about the mechanics.
For the mechanics, yeah, sure. My big thing on that would be the game might suffer from not fully going one way or another as far as is it a stealth game or is it a combat game?
Oh, okay.
That would be my biggest concern there as far as gameplay mechanics, because there are certain areas of the game where you naturally want to be a little stealthy.
Yeah.
But the second you're busted, any opportunity of returning to stealth, you know, like hiding, waiting for everything to calm down, and then reapproaching the situation as a stealth game is gone. So that was a little clunky for me, but I did find, you're right, like it was smooth. I wasn't getting caught on edges and the camera wasn't giving me as much fuss as the first game around. So I totally agree there. But as far as everything else, it was a little more frustrating because I think in the first game, I took more of a stealth approach.
I'm glad you brought that up.
I took more of a stealth approach because I didn't want to approach everything as just a full combat.
Yeah.
You know, I took it as a zombie apocalypse. Like, you'd be as stealthy as you can, and then when things break down, you get through. You don't sit there and you don't try to fight off like 20 walkers or clickers or things like that. You know, you hit what you can and you get to the exit point.
Right.
And this game didn't allow for that as much.
That is true, and makes me think. One thing I noticed was that I feel like supplies were much harder to come by in the first one.
Yeah.
And so in this, like in that one, I felt like I agree with you. Way more stealth, way more caution in the approaches to the fights, but it was based on the fact that, you know, you only had so many shivs.
Right.
And shivs were really important. And, you know, if you wasted them, you couldn't craft more, you know, necessarily. Or you only had so much ammo. And while some of those things still hold true in the second one, I don't find myself as concerned with using my resources, because it's almost like as soon as you die, like I've learned, this is an example, I've learned that after I get out of an encounter, don't heal up.
Right.
Because there's almost always some sort of food health around that you can snag, because I burned myself a few times, like heal myself immediately and then finding a candy bar.
Yeah.
You know, and it was like, damn it, because you do kind of need all that stuff. But to your point, the final thing I'll say is that when I come into most of these encounters in this game, you know, say you walk up on a group of 2 or 3 people that are at a campfire talking, right? And, you know, there are scars that are going to attack you.
Right.
I don't even freaking hesitate anymore. Like if they're grouped together, I literally am like immediately pipe bomb, you know?
Blow them up. Yeah.
And just take them out as they come running at you, because I feel like I've had much more success with the new combat, or, you know, just enhanced mechanics and smoothness of the controls, whatever, all that stuff we were just mentioning.
Yeah.
I feel like it's given me much more confidence to just blast my way through these situations versus like, damn, like I need to not fire a bullet here because I can't afford it.
Yeah, you can't make a noise.
Yeah.
Well, and it's tough because the combat is fun. Nothing feels as good as swinging a nail bat into the side of a head of a clicker, and it's brutal and graphic and crazy.
Oh my God, the deaths are just absolutely brutal.
Yeah. Yeah.
The game holds nothing back from that standpoint, right? Like, even when you die on accident,
Yeah.
like, I fell into the water on accident at one point, and, like, Ellie's head just, like, smacks this rock. There's just blood everywhere, and you're like nothing is left out when it comes to how you or somebody else can die in The Last of Us.
It desensitizes you to it a little bit because you're like, oh my God, I'm seeing horrific things like every 5 seconds in this game, and the noises. And we'll get to the music and the sound, but the noises of it all. But I think maybe my issue was I wanted to play this game like I played the first one. I wanted to be stealth.
Sure.
I wanted to walk into a room, see 20 clickers, throw a beer bottle, have it crash, have them all be attracted to that area, and then slip around to the side because that's how I might approach it in real life.
Right.
And the game was really pushing you more towards now engage in combat.
Right.
Ellie is now a year, 2 years, 4 years, I forgot what the exact timeline is, more skilled.
Yeah.
And when you play as Abby is definitely more skilled.
They are much more badass. It's like playing as Joel, but with them.
Yeah. Oh, I'd say to some extent, Abby is more of a badass than Joel was.
I would agree. I actually have a note here, and I've kind of gone back and forth, and maybe it's blasphemy. Like I said, I haven't finished it yet, but I'm at the part where you're spending a ton of time playing as Abby.
Yup.
Kind of preferring it more. Like, I'm sorry, Ellie, but, you know, Abby's a beast. She's got better, like, hand-to-hand combat kills and stuff like that, you know?
Yeah.
Some cooler weapons. I don't know, man.
But she has that legit crossbow.
Yeah, the crossbow is definitely sweet. That is for sure.
Yeah.
I think they did a good job with giving you some different scenarios in the combat, though, right? And there's definitely a lot of different ways you can still approach things. So it gave me this thought that maybe if we came back, played it on a harder difficulty, because right now, I don't know about you, but I'm just playing on the normal standard difficulty.
Yeah, same.
But, you know, maybe making a run through it on the harder, you would see the supplies be less, the enemies be more, and so you actually are forced to take more of that stealth route. But one of my favorite things, and I don't know if you remember this, it was kind of early on in the game, because you're talking about throwing the bottle, it made me flash back to this, but there's a moment where you're in this like underground area and you're dealing with humans, and then you run into a bunch of clickers and whatnot.
Yeah.
And so I'm sitting down there, it's dark, and I remember like looking around trying to figure out how I was going to approach it, and then I just pull out a bottle and I just threw it out into the middle, and it literally, the NPCs, like all of the enemies, they just went into this crazy 5-minute battle with each other where like the humans were running around and the clickers were just chasing them nonstop, and like I just sat there and watched it, and I'm not gonna lie, but that was like one of my favorite moments of all the combat so far, was not firing a single shot, but just throwing a stupid beer bottle and then watching like little animated NPCs just terrifyingly run around.
Yeah, right, yeah. I think I read a review where somebody had knocked that moment and said that at any given time, the NPCs and the monsters stopped fighting each other and solely focused on them. And I was like, I didn't experience that at all. Like, because I very similar to you, I did that. Like, anytime that was an opportunity, that's what I wanted to do. Because if the clickers can take out the wolves, or the wolves can take out the clickers, that's what I'm going to allow them to do. And I'll just clean up scraps.
Yeah, save your resources, you know, your health, the whole 9 yards. Because, like, in some of those environments, too, it's so dark because the lighting is so well done.
Yeah.
So whether you're underground or you're in a dilapidated skyscraper, you know, like, you have nothing but this flashlight. It is built to just creep you the fuck out with the music and the sounds and everything that's going on, the creaking. It is a horror game, you know, and that, sometimes I think that kind of gets overlooked with Last of Us, because you see kind of the images and it looks just like intense action, but it is a horror game, kind of in the same way that The Walking Dead is very much a horror show,
right?
You know, it's easy to kind of look at other things and take the horror aspect out of it, but it's still got that, right? You know, as
there's jump scares. Plenty of them.
Right. And so, you know, when you're in combat in some of those areas and there's a lot going on and you're running because enemies are coming from every different direction.
Yep.
To me, it's way better to go the route that we did where we let them fight each other, because you might just get your ass kicked because you can't see anything.
Yeah, just let them like firefight it out, and why not? That was all cool. The lighting in that game is awesome, which does play back into the graphics. Like everything was just, it's frustrating, but it's all well done.
Yes. So I had two sides of thoughts here with the lighting. Absolutely, the lighting in this game is very good and it makes me excited for what is coming in the next generation with ray tracing.
Mm-hmm.
We're starting some of these games here at the end are like probably about as close as they can get to it without having that additional technology in the build. But one knock I had, kind of two knocks, is that sometimes the lighting reflected off of things in a way that made it look exactly like loot.
Oh.
And I don't know if you noticed that, but like lights hitting off of water or if things were wet, whatever it may be, like lighter textures, like you would get these flicker. I'm seeing, I feel, you get these flickers and you think it's loot or something on the ground. And so I feel like I've wasted a number of minutes just being like, oh, there was something over there. And then there's not.
Right.
But the other thing was, I don't know if you noticed this, but when Ellie gets rained on, or like even Abby too, but I thought it was worse with Ellie, she looks like a Lego figurine. Like, I don't know if you caught that, but like when she's wet, her hair, it literally looks plastic.
Oh.
Because it's trying to like reflect and show wetness. I don't know. It's just like there's this sheen that went over her, and that's all I could think about was like when I'm in the rain with Ellie, I'm like, now I'm Lego Ellie.
I can't say I picked up on that though, but it's been a while. I'd have to go back and replay it because I did blitz through the game.
Yeah.
I wanted to make sure that I beat it before another game came out, and so I beat it in probably the span of like 2.5 weeks.
Yeah, so it's been a little bit for you. If you go back and play it, you'll have to check it out. But it's just one thing I've noticed is because the rain and everything, again, the water is very well done for the most part. But I think there's just some of those combinations of textures and colors that, some things look a little bit like it just kind of it just made me think about like plastic wrapped in like shrink wrap.
Yeah.
Where you can tell it's like hard and kind of flat, but then it's got this sheen that's put over it with the plastic. I don't know, but it just kind of cracked me up.
Yeah, I have to look for it next time I go back.
So we talked a whole bunch here about kind of the overall game mechanics and visuals and whatnot. But what this game is really about is the story.
Yeah.
So there were some really extreme moments in this story that get you thinking, get you feeling. I mean, Naughty Dog, once again, is proving that they are just master storytellers. But what are your thoughts on the story? I know there was also been some controversy in the media and communities over choices that were made. So we can kind of touch on some of those things here. But all in all, what have you thought so far about the story?
So I enjoyed it up until a certain point. And I say really because knowing you haven't beat it yet, I'm going to be delicate with what I say exactly to not spoil the total ending for you. But
I appreciate that.
Basically, I'll break the game down into 3 parts. And Act 1 is Ellie, Act 2 is Abby, and then Act 3. I thought the game was fantastic in the first 2 acts.
Okay.
With Ellie, everything that happens with Ellie and Joel, and getting updated on Ellie, and then everything that happens with Joel, because I'll just go ahead and say it, the death of Joel is crazy.
It was brutal.
And it was brutal, and it was horrific. Like, we talk about all of the horrific things that happen in this game.
Yeah.
Joel goes out, and really puts you in that moment where you're Ellie, someone's got a knee on you and pinned you down, and you can only basically see someone's head. It's the Glenn moment from Walking Dead.
Exactly. Yeah. And it happened early.
Yeah.
I was surprised at how early it happened. I expected it at some point in the game, but being, Act 1 as you describe it was a little surprising.
Yeah. So that, I loved all of Act 1. A heartbreaker to see Joel go, but storyline, I was like, oh man, I like it.
Right.
It's going to put Ellie on a path.
Agreed.
And I don't know where this path is going to take us, but I'm here for the ride. And then Act 2, where you actually hinted at it a little bit, where you spend a little more time as Abby. And then in whether it's her enhanced combat or the characters around her, because I think they did a great job of introducing kind of what the wolves and the whole Firefly Washington breakout group.
Agreed.
With Owen and Mel and Isaac and Manny.
Yep.
I love that group, and I love seeing kind of what civilization would turn into in this post-apocalyptic world.
It's all very believable and well done.
Very believable, yeah. And I love the introduction of Yara and Lev and the Seraphites, or the scars. I think that's like a great moment as well, where they continue to call them scars.
Yeah.
Lev, at every chance that he has, is like, Seraphite, like,
You're offending me.
yeah, like Lev doesn't let it go. It's like, we're not scars, Seraphites. And loved Act 2. The issue I have is in Act 3.
Hmm.
And it just felt like the game unraveled a little bit for me, because
Ooh.
it's this story of like the cycle of revenge, for broad strokes. And you get revenge in Act 1 of Abby coming back for Joel, and then Ellie going back for Abby. And then it's like there's this natural, and this is my personal opinion, it's this natural end to the cycle of violence.
Gotcha.
And then Act 3 just happens. And the whole thing just completely unravels. And I understand what they did, and the grit and the determination and not being able to let go, and grief-stricken, and everything you've gone through. I understand that. I understand the motivation. But it also felt like you ended at the same point. What was the purpose of Act 3?
Gotcha.
If we were all going to come back to this same area. And so that's where my big knock. I like everything else about the story. The way they've shown that world, and the way people develop as a society, and the different factions and the groups. And like, you can call the Seraphites a religious cult. But, like, you got to think in a post-apocalyptic world that would happen.
Oh, yeah.
New faiths would emerge.
Right.
That's mine. It's just that Act 3 just unraveled a little bit for me.
Gotcha.
With where you are, what did you think?
I've really enjoyed it so far. I did notice some of those things where it was kind of a repetitive cycle, some very similar themes happening between the two characters. And I mean, really, I think my only major knock on the story to this point, where I'm at, is that it's kind of like a one-trick pony, if I can use that term at times. Like, you see things like Ellie as she's going to hunt down Joel's killers, and when you confront them, she just continues to make kind of the same decisions.
Yeah.
Like, they're always hinting at these characters being inherently good in ways, but then it's like they always kind of just make the same bad decisions, or not bad decisions, but like the same hard choice.
Right.
And I get it. We see it in most post-apocalyptic things. You have to be prepared to not even know yourself.
Yeah.
Like, you are going to be a totally different human, and humans in general are going to act entirely different than everything we think is normal and acceptable and expected in 2020 society, right?
Yeah.
So, but you kind of like to see some of the different changes in character development, and I think you get a little bit more of that from Abby from where I'm at in the story so far. I mean, obviously Ellie and Abby are more similar than they might think.
Well, and the story does a great job of showing you that.
Right. But I feel like up to this point, with the introduction of the Seraphites and some of the stuff you do with Abby, that it's almost like we're seeing more character development or building. Maybe it's more building is the word, since it's a new character, but we're seeing more out of her than I feel like we got out of Ellie.
No, and I agree. And I think that's all was the plan, was to make you sympathize, because if not, it's just like, it's black and white.
True.
And Ellie's on the hunt to hunt down Joel's killer, as silly as that sounds. But like, it just makes everything black and white. You're Ellie, you're good, and Joel's killers are bad, and you need to get revenge. But playing as Abby, you really start to see there are two sides to the story, and like I said, the cycle of revenge.
Yeah.
And paying back, and it's well done. Like we said at the start of all this, it's really well done. It makes you think, and it makes you do some really introspective look into yourself, and how would I operate here? And
right.
Everyone is emotionally damaged from seeing father figures die, and
to say the least. Yeah.
And this and that in this crazy environment. It's going to push you to do crazy things. Like you said, a lot of it is cycling back. And I think that ultimately was my problem, like I said, with the final act, is that it felt like it was just, in the end, it was going to cycle back to something that we already came to. So I don't understand why we went there.
Yeah.
Unless you could have given me more purpose and more detail as to why we went there.
Well, it's interesting to hear that, and I guess we'll have to kind of circle back once I do beat it, and we can have the full conversation. But
I was like, because it's difficult to sit here and say that without fully explaining and detailing what happens.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, though, kind of to wrap it up, it's interesting to hear you say that when I've seen stuff from Naughty Dog saying that they don't expect another Last of Us to be made and no DLC. So it's kind of interesting to see how, if it ends in a certain way that you're kind of giving me some thoughts on, if there's going to be nothing else after that, it's an intriguing choice to me because it sounds more like it almost would have been set up for a third one in a way. But I'm pretty sure that I read that they're thinking they're going to move on to something else, and this is the Last of Us series that we get.
Yeah, I had not seen that. And I won't say that it ends where it's going to set up. It ends, and the way it ends is fine. It could be the last game, the last moment, and that would all be fine and make sense.
Kind of like the first one did.
There's some open-ended questions, and I don't need a bow, but hearing that, I'm now even more frustrated with Act 3 because it feels like it introduces certain things that I now want answers to. But yet, if you're not going to give me a DLC, why did you introduce these things?
Yeah.
Like, why did you take me there? Why did you show me this if you weren't ever going to give me an explanation?
Well, who knows? Maybe we will get something, but I remember shortly after it came out, there was something I read that, they believe that the sentiment from Naughty Dog was that it was going to be kind of the end of it. But it's also hard to say because games like this, IPs like this in general, that are so wildly successful, it's hard for companies and creators to just walk away from them.
Yeah.
So if there's anything in them that they feel like they didn't wrap up completely or aren't done with, then there's no way we don't see a PS5 version of Last of Us, Last of Us 3.
Well, and that's kind of how the first one ended.
Right, exactly.
The first one ended, it could have been perfectly done, over, and in my opinion probably should have been, but we got that gravy. We got that extra gravy that I wanted. And so they did give us a second one. I don't know if you want to talk about the social media, because there was a ton of social media outcry and just insanity over this game.
I saw some of it. We can touch on some of it here. I know I stayed away from a lot of the details personally because I hadn't beaten the game, but it was impossible not to see the headlines. I know that I saw stuff about people being mad about the sexuality in the games. I know that I saw stuff about death threats on some of the character actors, and it really, just seeing it at that 30,000 foot, headline view, I was like, what in the hell is wrong with people? I think you kind of looked into some of it a little bit more. So what exactly happened with some of that?
So surface level, that is exactly what happened. A lot of people were really upset, first and foremost, over the death of Joel, and that, oh my God. And the argument, one of the more reasonable arguments I saw, was somebody being like, PlayStation screwed up because they had a character that they could have built a lot off of moving forward, because of like Joel in the first one. Like, so many people love Joel. They were like, man, Joel's like the next Crash Bandicoot or Mario or like
Nathan Drake.
Like, he's the key character that PlayStation can, have like hold the flag and move forward. And then they just killed him.
Yeah.
So people were upset about that and the fact that he died in such a horrific manner. But I thought it pushed the story forward and it made sense and all did really well there. And then it took a tailspin into, like you said, the death threats of people coming at Laura Bailey, who is the mocap and voice actress for Abby.
Yeah.
And people came at her personally and then came at Neil Druckmann personally.
All because of the Joel death?
All over Joel, and then basically saying that they were pushing a social agenda.
Oh my God.
With the fact that, like, Ellie is gay, which, by the way, if you played the first one and you didn't pick up on the fact that she was gay, like, you weren't paying attention.
Right.
And especially when you played the DLC for the first one, like, they don't hide it. That's not a twist. That's not a spoiler. You weren't paying attention.
Yeah.
And then basically another big thing was, and then Lev, the introduction of Lev, who's like a transgendered character, and they basically said between making like Ellie gay and introducing a transgendered character, it's all about Neil Druckmann pushing his social agenda.
Oh my God.
And people just got all upset about it.
Were people mad that Abby was buff?
Yes, actually, yeah, that was the,
Oh, really?
100%. That was the next
Oh
one
my
I was going to go
God.
to, is people were legitimately upset over her physical appearance.
Wow.
And to the point where I saw an article where somebody actually because when you're Abby and you're in her little bunker space where her bed is, she has her workout schedule on the wall.
Yeah.
People have legitimately screenshotted that workout schedule and broken it down and said it's impossible for her to achieve that amount of physicality based on that workout schedule. And I'm like, who has time for that?
That's so ridiculous.
There are bigger things happening in the world, everybody, that you don't need to break down a video game's workout schedule to determine whether or not that character can actually look that masculine. Because it was one of the things that I thought was really like appealing, I don't know if that's the right word, about Abby, is that, yeah, she's ripped. And you got to think, what is her day-to-day life? She's basically a soldier.
Yeah.
It would make sense for her to be that ripped.
Exactly. Well, and that was my thing, was I started looking at it through some different lenses from the standpoint. I mean, it's not like you don't see her as a less jacked person.
Yeah.
Like, they give you different scenes to show that she wasn't always like this, but when you see that from the past, to me, it almost put it into context because of what happens to her. She becomes a soldier, right? Like, she looks no more buff to me than, like, I don't know, Charlotte Flair.
Right.
But it started making me think, yeah, exactly. Like, women who are in these roles would absolutely have a different physique or maybe a more masculine physique solely from the fact that they're constantly doing extremely physical things, whether they're working out or just, I don't know, climbing ropes everywhere they go because they have to like overcome obstacles just to travel. But, you know, and they don't say this, so this is totally just my thought, but it actually started making me think, like, what if Abby was using HGH or some sort of steroids, right? Like, she was kind of on a warpath and there would be benefits to being as strong as possible. So would it be that crazy to think about somebody in these situations if they had access to those things to, maybe it's not a sexual based thing like we always see and everybody wants to make it out to, right?
Yeah.
Just to say, hey, it would benefit me a lot to be stronger, buffer, faster.
Yeah.
And make those decisions. I don't know. That is insane to me that was actually what happened around the death threats. Because when I saw the headlines, immediately assumed, I guess I can put it, that it was around the homosexuality.
Yeah.
Because that's just still where we are in this ridiculous fucking world. But to be, I don't know if it's better or worse, it's just more surprising that it was over a video game character killing another video game character. That is absolutely ridiculous to me that somebody would then terrorize an actual human over fantasy and fiction.
Yeah.
You know?
Oh, yeah.
And the whole thing about Joel, I don't know about you, bro, but we've been playing as straight white men ourselves.
Right.
We're straight white men for 25 freaking years in video games.
Yeah.
Like, is it that hard to be okay with playing as some different perspectives or seeing things through other eyes? Like, to me, like, I actually was really excited to see them take those routes because it's like, I can't relate to being teenage girl,
right?
Let alone somebody going through the things that Ellie's going, but it gives you perspective. It makes you think. It's good storytelling. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't know. Like, so I can't even relate to anybody that's out there, like, flipping their shit over something like these things.
Oh, 100%. The words, you couldn't have said truer words there because that's how I felt. I'm like, my brain can't compute, like, being upset about that. And
yeah,
there were a handful, it got so bad that, like, people had to get involved. James Gunn tweeted.
Wow.
Like, he even tweeted, basically, like, the last part of his tweet here says, it seems people are confusing fiction with reality, in reality, and in fiction. Yeah, like, guys, it's not real.
Yeah.
It's a video game.
PlayStation isn't going to go under because they don't have Joel.
Right? Yeah, it'll be all right. And I thought it was crazy to the point where, like, Naughty Dog also had to put out a statement and be like, we welcome criticism and a critical discussion, but we condemn any form of harassment or threats directed towards our team and cast.
Yeah.
Because, like, it's insane that people are going to get that crazy over it, and it's a video game, guys. Like, it's a video game. There are bigger and worse things going on. You need to just enjoy the fiction, enjoy the story.
Yeah.
And, like, have it be thought-provoking. And if you can't, then don't play it.
Right.
You know, go back to your whatever else. I don't know, but...
Well, and it amazes me that some people, and I don't want to get too political here, but it just amazes me that some people can literally go that far off the deep end over just some, like, visuals.
Yeah.
Because if you look at the rest of the story, what's going on, what you're being asked to do, those aspects of the character are like so low on the list of things that I'm even interested in or like concerned about, right?
Yeah.
You definitely take note. I'm not trying to brush over or say I don't care. Like, you take note that these are big aspects of these characters' personalities and experiences, but that's like what makes them so good.
Yeah.
Like, it makes them so interesting is to think like, God, on top of being in the apocalypse, you now have to figure out how to navigate being gay.
Yeah. Teenage love in general.
Teenage love, yeah, and so once again, I've been playing as, straight white dudes like myself in video games for as long as I've been playing video games. Let's get out there. Let's diversify. It's totally fine. To me, it's just about being more interesting.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Give me something new.
Different perspectives.
Right.
Like different views, and it just broadens your mind.
It's not going to hurt me.
Yeah. To know the other side. Yeah.
It's just unreal. And God, to even think about like being violent against somebody over something that happened in anything of fiction or art, and it happens. It's not like it's brand new, but it just blows my mind that it's still a thing that society has to deal with.
It's true. We got a little off base there, as
End rant.
But I tell you, one way or another, Last of Us was still a fun game, thought-provoking game. We'll move on to some of the other things that we've been playing. Dabbing a little into the indie world.
Oh, yeah.
I know we both have been. It's just been a great time for independent developers to be pushing their games and telling their stories. So what's some of the other games outside of that Last of Us that you've been playing?
But I feel like I kind of like ran the other way in some things because, clearly if you haven't picked it up, The Last of Us is extremely heavy.
Yeah.
It's stressful and intense the whole time you're playing it. So I actually found myself at one point a couple weeks ago looking around the Game Pass on Xbox like I do every now and then just to see what's out there. They're constantly adding and, subtracting games. And I came across a couple of indie games that had been out for a while and I had heard or seen, little things here and there, but I never played them. I never bought them, but having the opportunity now to essentially play them for free or with that subscription, I pretty much jumped right on both of them and really got into it. And the first one I'll just kind of mention was Dead Cells, which is a retro styled like roguelike, Metroidvania platformer, little Dark Souls kind of aspects worked in there, but you have one life, and then you've got to pretty much go back to the beginning and try and work your way through the games.
Right.
I started touching on that a little bit, and it was great. Highly suggested. It came out back in 2017, but has great combat, great graphics, great mechanics. Like, it's really enjoyable. But then that got me kind of down the path of being into these games, and I saw Enter the Gungeon. And Enter the Gungeon came out back in 2016, so it's been out for even longer, but it is one of the highest rated games of the last 5 years.
Wow, okay.
And I had seen, like, of any genre. Like, if you go look at the Metacritics and the different scores, it's like all 9s and 10s across the board. It is up there. But it essentially is it's another roguelike kind of game. It's a dungeon crawler, but you go in, you have one life, and you're trying to get through these levels, and they're done in 16-bit graphics with a very Legend of Zelda, like old school Legend of Zelda top-down view.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of like Zelda meets Contra. So the view and the graphics as you're running through the rooms is very Zelda. You're moving room to room. You're searching for items. You're searching for hidden rooms.
Yeah.
You're exploring this dungeon that are all procedurally generated, so it's different every time you go into a new level 1 or a new level 2.
Oh, that's cool.
Every run, the dungeons are unique. They may have similar visuals or design elements, like level 1 seems to always be kind of like a castle, and then, level 3 always seems to be some sort of like a mine, but the rooms are different, the enemies you're going to run into are different, everything is unique every time you go, but it shoots like Contra, so it's actually a action shooter, one of those ones where you use the right stick to kind of choose your direction and aim, and then you're shooting, so you're it's just really fast-paced shooting action, and you're dodging all the other bullets from the enemies, and really diverse enemy types. There's hundreds of weapons, hundreds of items, and you unlock them slowly as you take additional runs at the game.
Okay.
So up front, you have like nothing, and the game, like in the chest and stuff, you won't get much. But as you go along, and every time you get a new item, it's now in the loot pool essentially, and more likely for you to get it. So you can start getting better weapons, you can start getting better upgrades that will help you as you make these attempts to get to the end of the game.
So it doesn't carry over, like you unlock a laser gun and then now you can choose to have that laser gun at the gate.
Nope.
That laser gun is now a percentage possibility in the first chest you open.
Yeah,
Okay,
exactly.
okay.
That's the way I've taken it so far, is that you always have a chance to get anything. Because obviously you're going to unlock stuff. And I've gotten guns out of, initial chests that are new in the first time. But once you have them the first time, it seems like the likelihood of you getting those weapons goes up.
Okay.
Now when I go to the level 1 boss, I might have that rocket launcher or machine gun, or my personal favorite, the Super Meat Boy gun, which literally shoots razor blades that bounce all over the walls and stuff. Like, this game is so wild from top to bottom, and it loads fast. The mechanics are really strong. You can bounce in and out of instances essentially in just a matter of minutes, but they have such a diversity of the items and the power-ups and the weapons. A lot of zaniness, a lot of silliness. It's really fun, wacky kind of a game to keep you intrigued, and it's really hard.
Nice.
I've only gotten to level 4 one time. I'm now consistently getting to level 2 and 3, but I die a lot on level 1 too. Because it's that randomness to it. Even the bosses, there's 3 to 4 bosses per level that you could potentially fight, so there's no 100% getting okay, I know that I'm gonna fight this guy every single time and he's gonna do these movements. It's unique. The fights are unique, so I really was blown away by it, honestly, and it kind of really cut into my Last of Us time, because I got so addicted for 2 or 3 weeks to just running this game all the time, and I still am. Even if I just have a few minutes here and there, I'll go in and be like, I can run a dungeon.
Yeah, just run one real quick.
Yeah.
That's cool, yeah. Now, when you pick up a new weapon, is it like Contra where the new weapon you pick up replaces your old weapon? Or can you cycle through, pick up 5 and then vary which one you need?
Yeah, you can cycle.
Okay.
And so they all have their different ammos and different abilities, but you can cycle. You can sell them to this little trash monster that comes out of the sewer in the gift shop. And, there's a hidden store in every level that you can find where you can buy more keys and different items and stuff like that.
Okay.
So there's a lot of little things, subtle things going on in the game, and it doesn't give you a whole lot of tutorial. It doesn't give you a whole lot of direction. It's also one of those kind of games where it's you go in and you kind of figure it out and you find little things, but it's almost like every so often, every couple times I do a run, things are happening. So after, I don't even know, maybe the first 10 or 15 runs, this new NPC showed up, and he is essentially working on the elevator between levels that will make it, if you give him enough materials over, in a run, you can unlock it so you can skip the first dungeon.
Oh.
And I'm assuming that maybe you can make it as you go through, that you could keep skipping dungeons so that way you could start closer to the end, versus having to power through I don't even know how many levels there actually are to beat the game. But it's one of those things like Dead Cells, I heard it said, where Dead Cells is only a 45-minute game, but it'll take 40 hours to beat. And I think Enter the Gungeon's kind of a similar style, where the game itself is not that long, but there's so many variables and there's such a higher level of difficulty that you really have to put in a good bit of time to unlock everything, get the skill set, and then go and do an awesome run to go through it all and beat it.
Perfect timing and perfect storm. Get the right enemy type.
Yeah.
The right monster on the other side of the wall.
Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds pretty awesome. And I know that it's all that old, like you said, that old 8-bit Zelda look to it.
Mm-hmm.
Which, always brings back the feels, the nostalgia look to it.
Oh, yeah.
Is it online multiplayer?
No, that would go next level. It's got couch co-op, so you can play with another person locally.
Okay.
But I was really hoping when I saw that it had multiplayer that it was going to be online, because I don't know if I would play anything else right now if I could actually jump in with somebody else and attack it. I haven't played it co-op at all yet, but I am interested to check that out and see if it makes it easier, if it makes it harder, because you never know sometimes with games like that. But it's not a platformer, which is nice. So when you come into a lot of rooms, you kind of have everything on the screen, and you're like, everything locks down and you have to kill everybody in that room before you can then proceed. So I think that it would actually work really well with two players, simply from the standpoint of I don't see that you would have any issues with like one player being on one side of the screen and the other player on the other, and like getting tough to see what's going on like you get sometimes with some of those games. But all in all, I really don't have almost anything bad to say about it so far. And like I said, I know it's an age game, but it was new to me. This is the first time I played it, and I feel like it's going to stay in my catalog of games on my Xbox for a good while. It's also on PS4 and Switch. It really feels like it would be an amazing game on the Switch.
As you've described it, I'm like, man, this would be so much fun handheld.
Yeah, it's kind of built for that. If I ended up actually paying for it outside of the Game Pass subscription, I think that I would pick it up on Switch just because it would travel so well, and, you know, the controllers and everything is just kind of built more for that platform, in my opinion.
Yeah, and that's probably what I think, like, when I say handheld, like, travel with it, it's easy enough just to, I've got 15 minutes, but I don't have time to boot up my PlayStation or, do anything like here, but I can grab the Switch, put it in my lap, and boom, 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 play it a little bit. That's pretty sweet.
Yeah, so that really was kind of like my surprise game of the summer. And Dead Cells, I kind of touched on it briefly, is almost every way equally as good. It's definitely different because it's more of a vertical and side-scrolling platformer, but you get a ton of weapons, you're leveling them up, the combat is really intriguing, and like every weapon kind of gives you different combat experiences between like close range and far range, and it's got that really cool comic-y cell shaded look to it.
Okay, yeah.
So that was really impressive. So I love Souls games, but these types of like the roguelike kind of older style games, Binding of Isaac is another one I've seen a lot that's kind of similar to this or is compared to these. They're not games that I played a lot before.
Yeah.
So I actually kind of have this new genre that I love right now, and it's these, because I'm like, I've been spending so much time checking them out, and both of them highly recommend, but I think I would give a slight, upper hand to Enter the Gungeon.
Yeah, and it sounds like they're fun, not much thought. There's probably a light story.
Yeah.
Nothing that you have to remember each time. Like, it just makes it very easy to
100%.
pick it up, play, maybe put it down for a month, come back to it, not really have a drop in skill level.
Exactly.
That is pretty cool. I'm intrigued. If I wasn't drowning in games I need to play right now, I would probably go do that, but I literally feel like I'm drowning in games, like trying to get one done so before the next one comes out.
I think if anything, I would suggest just like putting it on your watch list, right?
Yeah.
And if you see that it goes on sale on the Switch or something like that, or if it's a free download on PS Network or something, just be like, snag it.
Okay.
Even if you don't play it right away, because it feels like the kind of game. I mean, it's 5 years old, it's still going strong, but it's got that retro feel. So, I mean, I could see it being a game that I go back to over the years, or we just want to pick up and play something because a buddy's over, let's run some Enter the Gungeon. Like, I could see it having that kind of replayability and value if you could snag it easy. And even if you can't play it right now, I'd say it's worth it.
Nice. Yeah. What's interesting, you talk about snagging a game on sale, because that's actually what happened to me with my indie game that I spent I shouldn't say a decent amount of time. It's only a 2-hour game, but I spent a weekend playing.
Okay.
And it's a game called The First Tree.
I have not even heard of this.
Yeah.
So when I saw you mention it as something for this, I was really intrigued, and I actually tried not to go look at anything.
Okay.
Because I want to hear what you have to say about this game. I just know that there's some forest and there's a fox, and there's a lot of foxes in gaming right now with Ghost of Tsushima everywhere.
Yeah.
I just left it at that.
Well, yeah, and I am playing Ghost of Tsushima. So you brought up Ghost, and I am playing Ghost. Ghost is the reason I needed to finish Last of Us so soon, because I knew Ghost was coming and I didn't want them to overlap.
True.
I'll talk about Ghost for 20 seconds here. The game is gorgeous, and it's basically one long photo mode.
Nice.
And super smooth. It feels massive, so it's going to be a slow burn, because the game honestly feels like it could be 100 hours.
Ooh.
But maybe I'll talk about it more in depth after I've beaten it, because I have a huge comparison.
Okay.
And that is The Witcher.
Ooh.
And the way I've heard people talk about The Witcher is kind of how I feel I'm experiencing Ghost right now.
That's a big comparison.
It's big, and maybe once I beat it, like I'll dial that back because I've never actually played The Witcher. But in this, on the idea that like side quests matter, and you approach each enemy, like I think of like Geralt, you need the silver sword and the regular sword depending on what enemy.
Yeah.
Ghost is very similar. You get 4 different samurai stances, and depending on who you're fighting, the samurai stance will help you.
Gotcha. So you got to be a little more deliberate in like which approach you're taking, kind of stuff like that. Some of those similarities.
Am I being approached by a bunch of like guys with swords or guys with spears? Because then that's going to determine what stance I use, or a brute.
Yeah.
But Ghost is absolutely incredible. It's gorgeous. But the main game I want to talk about is The First Tree. And very similar to Enter the Gungeon, it's an independent developer. And it's a little dated. It did come out in 2017.
Okay.
And it was made and published by a single person.
Oh, whoa.
And his name is David, and I might butcher his last name, and I apologize, but Whaley, Whehle. So David Whaley.
Okay.
And it's a very simple game. It's a simple exploration game. It's only about 2 hours, maybe 3 hours long, and you control a fox. You control a mother fox that's looking for her children. And while you are doing this, like it's these 2 parallel stories that are happening at the same time. You are controlling this fox and you're wandering around the forest and all these other areas and like kind of exploring and collecting. There's a narrator. And if I'm correct, it's this David guy narrated the game.
Oh, okay.
He's one of 2 voice actors. And it's this guy narrating the game that's talking to his wife about a dream that he just had. The dream that he had is of the fox that you are playing.
Okay.
And so like basically he's telling his wife about this dream and you are playing the dream, but then it's these, like I said, it's these 2 parallel stories, and he's also talking about the death of his father.
So it's got some like emotional stuff going on.
Yeah, and honestly, and that's like the one thing I can say about this game is like it is emotionally cathartic. Like it just, if you have tension or stress and you want to just take 2 to 3 hours and just have this experience, it's not hard and you can't die. Like it's you do nothing but
He's telling a story more than anything.
He's telling a story, yeah. And that's why like it was so unique. And I found it because I was house sitting for my brother for a weekend, and I didn't take my PlayStation. I just took my Switch. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to find, and I do this every now and then when I house sit for him over the years. I go and I buy a game and then I play it. That's what I play that weekend while I'm at his house.
Sure.
Years ago, it's how I beat Marvel Lego. But I found it and it was on sale in the Switch store. It was like 90% off. I think I bought it for like $3. And it just ended up being this whole experience where you're wandering around as this fox, you're finding the different areas, everything's cell shaded, it's got that look to it, but the story is so deep and you connect so much with not just the narrator telling the story about growing up in Alaska with his father and like expectations of his father and what he wanted to do with his life, but then you're also experiencing this game as this mother fox trying to find her children who are lost and, spoiler, are dead. And you find them as they've died.
When you're going around exploring, are you ever put into like conflict? Like, do you ever actually have to do anything in like the traditional video game sense? Like, I don't want to say combat. That doesn't seem like the right word to use with what you're saying. But, like puzzles or, just anything like that you have to overcome to progress.
There are slight platforming puzzles.
Okay.
There's no combat, but you can jump and you can light like little parts of the forest on fire to burn away trees to open up a new area.
Okay.
So it's like some basic platforming things, and like you jump and get a double jump. It's just really, it's not about the gameplay. It's all about the story.
Well, that makes sense.
Yeah.
I was just curious if it worked any moments or anything like that in there to kind of mix it up or liven it up.
Yeah, some slight puzzling.
Gotcha.
But it's more about just exploring the different areas and telling the story. It's a lot about life and understanding death, and obviously the first tree being like the origin of life and a lot of things like that.
Okay.
And you can find some artifacts along the way. There's some collectibles and things like that. But one of the things that I thought was really unique about this game is the whole time you're playing, and it might be the most interesting aspect of the whole game, is the whole time you're playing, you're collecting these little orbs. And sometimes the orbs are there to kind of show you where to go.
Okay.
And then other times they're a little hidden and part of the puzzle. So you're collecting these orbs and they give you a counter and they're showing you what that counter is and where you're at, but you never do anything with the orbs. And so like about an hour and a half into the game, I'm like, okay, well, I'm sitting here at like 30 orbs, but I haven't done anything with these orbs yet. There's no upgrades. There's nothing I can do.
Trying to upgrade my fox.
Right? Yeah. I was like, I want to get a triple jump. Why not? Or maybe a growl or a claw scratch or something. It's like a Pokemon.
Yeah.
What you end up finding out is at the end of the game, you're allowed to write a note to your deceased children. And the orbs are the character limit for the message that you write to your children.
Whoa.
And I'm telling you, when I beat the game and I hit that moment where it's like, leave a message for your children, which also opens it up as a message for other people that have beaten the game to read.
That's cool.
Yeah, like that's your character limit. And it's like, it's this emotional roller coaster.
That's very cool.
And then it hits you at the end. And it's like, man, I'm gonna get choked up over this $3 like simple game, but it's a whole experience. And like I said, it's nothing groundbreaking, and it's not gonna blow you away. I'm not gonna sit here and rant and rave and say it's one of my favorite games of all time.
Sure.
I might not even play it again. I'm not even sure there's a reason to play it a second time, but to experience it that one time and to go on that journey was something else.
Right. Well, and clearly it was done well enough that it impacted you on some level.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
It was an experience. It's really interesting to me because there is this whole genre of the video game industry that are games like this, right? Where they are just a video game version of a short story or of a fictional story, you know what I mean? And that's all they don't have beat 'em ups. They don't have all this loot to collect. They don't have all this XP to earn. And I've never personally put too much time into them. And it's not really because I don't like them or don't, whatever. It's just, they just aren't really on my radar as much as everything else. And so it's interesting to really hear because some of them do pop up every now and then and get this critical acclaim or, people start to follow them and talk about them a lot. So it's really cool to see or hear you talk about something like this. And because I don't even know, you haven't played too many of these kind of games either, right?
No, I dabble in a few story games like Man of Medine and Erica, the game that recently came out on PlayStation Plus, or Detroit Becoming Human, where like you take control and you have to make choices and it dictates the story and a few things like that. But nothing quite like this where it's a contained story and I'm taking you on this journey. You don't really get to make any choices.
It's not like a Telltale game where you're choosing every left and right direction.
Right, yeah. The creator wanted to take you through this, and a lot of it was reflection. I read into it a little bit, and a lot of it was reflection from his part and the death of his own father.
Okay. That's what I was about to ask, because it sounds kind of specific and it kind of sounds personal. And so I was going to ask you if you had looked into the creator at all and to see if he had some really specific and kind of real world motivations or inspirations for this game. So that's kind of interesting. It sounds almost like it was like a tribute to either, I guess you said his late father, or you were saying with the kids. I was like, maybe he went through something rough with his own kids or something like that. But
yeah,
that's really cool. I might have to check it out. Like it sounds powerful.
Yeah. Oh, and it was. And like I said, don't expect anything crazy. Like there's the graphics aren't gonna blow you away. There are some audio hiccups. Like it's not a 10 out of 10. Like there are some glaring flaws. Like, and even at some point you're like, man, the narration, like you probably could have used a better microphone there. You know what I mean? Some of that is there, but that's not what it's about. It's well worth like the 2 hours and just, it's like watching a movie, and just experiencing something. And I may have ruined it a little bit by telling you how the character thing plays out, but it is absolutely worth your time.
That's very cool.
The final year of a console generation is always an exciting time as larger studios are pushing the capabilities of the hardware, making truly remarkable games like The Last of Us, Ghosts, other things we're seeing right now. But it's also nice to see the comeback of the indie game market. Independent developers are getting stronger and more out of the box with their titles, giving gamers across the board quality options.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this chapter, be sure to hit the subscribe button to get new chapters of GeeK KetchUp every 2 weeks on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, CastBox, or wherever you listen to your podcast. Be sure to follow the show on social media, and you can find us on Facebook and YouTube at GeeK KetchUp Podcast, or on Twitter and Instagram at GeeK KetchUp Pod. Links to all these accounts are in the show notes below and on our website, GeeKKetchUpPodcast.com. Stay saucy, you nerds.